Close your eyes. You're standing on the flat Mesopotamian plain, 600 years before Christ. The air is dry, the heat radiating off the earth in visible waves. And rising out of the desert ahead of you is something that shouldn't exist. A double wall system so massive, so impossibly wide, that chariots raced 4 abreast across the top. Behind those walls, a city of 300,000 people, temples plated in gold, streets paved in limestone, and a gate covered in glazed blue brick that glowed like the sky itself. The Greek historian Herodotus visited this place and wrote that it surpassed in splendor any city of the known world. And the walls were its crown. But these weren't just defensive barriers. They were a theological statement. The king who built them, Nebuchadnezzar II, raised them as proof that no god, no army, and no prophecy could bring Babylon down. The prophet Jeremiah had already declared that Babylon would fall, that its broad walls would be utterly broken, that its high gates would be burned with fire. And Nebuchadnezzar's response was to build walls so enormous, so redundant, so layered with engineering that the prophecy would seem physically absurd. Today, we're walking inside the construction, brick by brick, layer by layer, to understand how the greatest fortification in the ancient world was built, what it cost in human labor and material, and why it ultimately failed to stop the one force it was designed to resist. Babylon sat on the banks of the Euphrates River in what is now central Iraq, approximately 85 kilometers south of Baghdad, near the modern town of Hilla. Under Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BCE, the city expanded to cover roughly 900 hectares, making it the largest city on Earth at that time. Population estimates range from 200,000 to 300,000 inhabitants, a number that rivaled some modern cities and was almost incomprehensible for the ancient world. The city was organized on a precise grid plan, bisected by the Euphrates, which flowed directly through the center of the urban area. Nebuchadnezzar had inherited a kingdom already powerful under his father Nabopolassar, the man who had destroyed the Assyrian Empire. But the son had a different ambition. He didn't just want to rule a capital. He wanted to build a wonder. He rebuilt the great temples. He paved the processional streets with limestone slabs set on a foundation of baked brick and bitumen. He constructed the Ishtar Gate, one of the most visually stunning structures of the ancient world. And according to tradition, he built the hanging gardens for his Median wife, Amytis, who missed the green hills of her homeland. But his greatest investment, the project that consumed more resources than any other, was the walls. Because Nebuchadnezzar understood something fundamental. Without the walls, everything else was temporary. The inner wall was called Imgur Enlil, meaning Enlil has shown favor, named after the supreme deity of the Mesopotamian pantheon. We know its exact dimensions because a German archaeologist named Robert Koldewey spent 18 years excavating it. From 1899 to 1917, Koldewey systematically uncovered the entire fortification system, measuring, documenting, and photographing what he found. The inner wall measured approximately 6.5 meters thick. Its core was constructed entirely of sun-dried mud brick, but its exterior was faced with kiln-fired brick, harder and more weather-resistant, bonded together with natural bitumen mortar. This bitumen was the concrete of Mesopotamia. It was harvested from natural petroleum seeps at a site called Hit on the Euphrates, roughly 150 kilometers upstream from Babylon. Workers heated the raw bitumen until it became liquid, then applied it between courses of brick as a waterproof, nearly indestructible adhesive. The mud bricks themselves were made from Mesopotamian alluvial, clay, mixed with chopped straw and reed fibers for tensile strength, then packed into standardized wooden molds and dried under the Iraqi sun. Each brick measured roughly 33 by 33 by 10 centimeters, and millions upon millions of them were required for the inner wall alone. When completed, the inner wall rose to an estimated height of 12 to 15 meters, roughly the height of a modern 4-story building, and stretched for approximately 18 kilometers around the perimeter of the inner city. But one wall was not enough. Beyond the inner wall stood a second barrier called Nimiti Enlil, meaning foundation of Enlil. Koldewey measured this outer wall at approximately 3.5 meters thick, thinner than the inner wall, but still a formidable structure by any standard. Between the two walls ran a corridor roughly 7 to 8 meters wide. This wasn't empty space. It was a military highway, allowing defenders to move troops rapidly between towers, along the entire perimeter, without being exposed to enemy fire. It also served a far more lethal purpose. Any attacker who managed to breach the outer wall would find himself trapped in this narrow corridor, hemmed in on both sides by vertical walls, with defenders raining arrows, stones, and burning oil from above in both directions simultaneously. It was a kill zone, engineered to turn a breach into a massacre. The outer wall was reinforced with defensive towers placed at intervals of approximately 20 meters. Koldewey documented hundreds of these towers along the perimeter, each one projected outward from the wall face, allowing archers and slingers to fire along the base of the wall at anyone attempting to scale it, a technique military engineers call flanking fire. Herodotus claimed the walls reached a height of 100 royal cubits, approximately 50 meters. Modern archaeology suggests that number was exaggerated, but even at the confirmed 12 to 15 meters, with 2 parallel walls, hundreds of towers, and a kill corridor between them, these walls represented the most sophisticated defensive engineering the world had ever seen. And before any attacker reached even the outer wall, they had to cross the moat. A massive water channel ran along the entire exterior of the outer wall system, fed directly by the Euphrates River through engineered intake channels. Koldewey's excavations confirmed the moat's existence and revealed that its walls were lined with kiln-fired brick set in bitumen to prevent erosion and water loss into the desert sand. Maintaining a permanent body of water in the arid Mesopotamian climate was itself an extraordinary engineering achievement. Evaporation rates in southern Iraq can exceed 2 meters per year. The infrastructure required to keep that moat filled year-round, the intake channels, the flow regulators, the waterproofed walls, represented an ongoing investment of labor and resources that never stopped. The moat served 3 simultaneous purposes. It was a physical barrier that prevented siege towers and battering rams from reaching the wall base. It was a psychological weapon, visible from a great distance, announcing to any approaching army that Babylon was prepared. And the clay excavated to create and maintain the moat was recycled directly into brick production. Any army approaching the city would first see the moat shimmering in the desert heat. Behind it, the outer wall rising like a cliff. Behind that, the inner wall rising higher still. 3 escalating barriers, each one more formidable than the last, before reaching a single building. The message was unmistakable. Turn back. The human cost of building these walls was staggering. Modern estimates suggest that hundreds of millions of individual bricks were required for the complete fortification system. Brick production in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was an industrial operation on a scale that wouldn't be seen again for millennia. Large teams of workers mixed clay with water, straw, and binding agents in open pits. The mixture was packed into standardized wooden molds, turned out onto vast, flat drying grounds, and left in the sun for days or weeks depending on the season. kiln-fired bricks required additional steps. They were carefully stacked inside massive updraft kilns, fueled by dried reed bundles, palm wood, or animal dung, and fired at temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Celsius until the clay vitrified into a dense, nearly stone-hard material. Many of the bricks Koldewey recovered bore a royal stamp pressed into the wet clay before firing. The inscription, in cuneiform script, reads Nebuchadnezzar, King of Babylon, provider for Esagila and Ezida, eldest son of Nabopolassar, King of Babylon. This stamp appeared on millions of bricks throughout the city. It was simultaneously a quality control measure and an act of supreme ego. Every single brick in the wall bore the king's name. The labor force that produced these bricks and laid them into the walls included prisoners of war, conscripted workers from conquered territories, and paid laborers. The Book of Daniel places Jewish captives in Babylon during precisely this period. Many scholars believe they were among the workers who built the very walls their own prophets had declared would fall. Jeremiah's prophecy that Babylon would become heaps of ruins was being spoken while those bricks were being stamped, fired, and laid into place. The most spectacular point of entry into the city was the northern gate, the Ishtar Gate, and the road that led through it. The gate was a massive double archway penetrating both the inner and outer walls, flanked by guard towers, and faced entirely with glazed brick in brilliant lapis lazuli blue. Decorating the walls of the gate were 575 relief sculptures of bulls and dragons, molded in brick. The bulls represented the storm god Adad. The dragons, called Mushrushu, represented Marduk, the chief deity of Babylon. Beyond the gate, the processional way stretched south through the city toward the great temple of Marduk. The Babylonians called this road Ibur Shabu, which translates to "the enemy shall never pass." The street was approximately 20 meters wide, paved with large limestone slabs on a foundation of baked brick set in bitumen. On the underside of each paving stone, Koldewey found an inscription crediting Nebuchadnezzar. The walls lining both sides of the processional way rose 12 meters high and were decorated with 120 glazed brick lions in striding poses, each measuring approximately 2 meters in length. The reconstructed Ishtar Gate stands today in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, assembled from thousands of glazed brick fragments that Koldewey shipped to Germany over the course of his 18-year excavation. The entire approach, from the moat to the gate to the lion-lined avenue, was designed to overwhelm any visitor, whether ambassador, merchant, or conquered king, with a single unified message. You are walking between gods on a road named after your defeat, into a city that cannot be taken. But the most complex piece of engineering in the entire system was also the one that would prove fatal. The Euphrates River flowed directly through the center of Babylon, entering and exiting through massive water gates built into the wall system. These openings represented an extraordinary engineering challenge. The river had to flow freely for commerce, irrigation, and the city's water supply. But the openings could not be allowed to compromise the defensive perimeter. Nebuchadnezzar's engineers installed bronze gates and iron grates at both the entry and exit points, allowing water to pass while blocking boats, swimmers, and any attempt at infiltration. Inside the city, kiln-fired brick embankment walls lined both banks of the river, set in bitumen, preventing flooding and maintaining the channel. A bridge connected the eastern and western halves of the city, described in ancient sources as stone piers supporting a removable wooden deck that could be pulled up at night for security. The river also fed an extensive canal network that distributed water throughout the urban area, feeding gardens, public buildings, and residential quarters. It was brilliant engineering. The river made Babylon wealthy, watered, and connected to the wider Mesopotamian trade network. But it also meant that the walls, for all their thickness and height and redundancy, had two holes in them that could never be fully sealed. The river that gave Babylon life was also the one gap in its armor. The prophets had spoken with extraordinary specificity. Jeremiah, writing from Jerusalem while Nebuchadnezzar still sat on his throne, declared that the broad walls of Babylon would be utterly broken, and her high gates burned with fire. He said Babylon would become heaps, a dwelling place for jackals, without an inhabitant. Isaiah, writing even earlier, declared that Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, would become as Sodom and Gomorrah. These prophecies circulated among the Jewish captives living inside Babylon itself. Daniel and his companions knew these words. They walked beneath the Ishtar Gate, past the glazed dragons and bulls, down the road called "The Enemy Shall Never Pass," knowing that their own scriptures said the enemy absolutely would. Nebuchadnezzar's response to these prophecies was architectural. He didn't argue theology. He built walls, thicker walls, higher walls, more towers, a deeper moat. He stamped his name on every brick. His own inscriptions, recovered on clay cylinders and building stones, declared that he had made the city of Babylon the foremost among all countries and every human habitation. The walls were not merely military infrastructure. They were a theological argument written in brick and bitumen. Nebuchadnezzar was constructing physical proof that his gods were stronger than the God of Israel. In October of 539 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Great arrived at the walls of Babylon with his army. He looked at the moat, the outer wall, the inner wall, the hundreds of towers, and he did not attempt to breach any of them. The Greek historians Herodotus and Xenophon both recorded what happened next. Cyrus sent a portion of his forces upstream and diverted the flow of the Euphrates River into a network of canals and marshes. The water level where the river passed beneath the walls of Babylon began to drop. When it was shallow enough, Persian soldiers waded through the riverbed, passed beneath the water gates, and entered the city through the one opening that Nebuchadnezzar's engineers could never fully close. The Nabonidus Chronicle, a cuneiform text now housed in the British Museum, confirms that Babylon fell without a significant battle. The chronicle records that the Persian general Ugbaru entered the city on the 16th of Tishri, and that there was minimal resistance. Daniel chapter 5 places the fall of Babylon on the night of Belshazzar's feast, the night a hand appeared and wrote on the palace wall the words Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Your kingdom has been numbered, weighed, and found wanting. The walls that Nebuchadnezzar had built to defy prophecy were never broken. They were never scaled. They were never battered down. They were simply walked around. The river that filled his moat, fed his gardens, watered his city, and made Babylon the marvel of the ancient world became the corridor through which his enemies entered. Every defensive layer, the moat, the outer wall, the kill corridor, the inner wall, the hundreds of towers, was rendered meaningless in a single night by soldiers who came in through the water. Today, the ruins of Babylon sit in the flat alluvial plain near Hilla, in Babel Governorate, Iraq. Koldewey's 18 years of excavation revealed the foundations of both walls, the Haite processional way, the base of the Ishtar Gate, and portions of the palace complex. But the mud brick cores of the great walls have largely returned to the earth from which they were made. Rain, millennia of neglect, and the slow chemistry of erosion have dissolved most sections into low, featureless mounds, barely distinguishable from the surrounding desert. In the 1980s, Saddam Hussein attempted a partial reconstruction, building new walls on top of the ancient foundations using modern bricks stamped with his own name alongside Nebuchadnezzar's, an act widely condemned by archaeologists as destructive to the original site. In 2019, UNESCO designated Babylon a World Heritage Site. The Ishtar Gate reconstruction in Berlin's Pergamon Museum remains the most complete visual representation of what Babylonian engineering looked like at its peak. And millions of Nebuchadnezzar-stamped bricks still litter the ground at the site. Visitors can pick them up, hold them, and read the cuneiform inscription that once declared this king the provider for the great temples, the builder of the invincible city. Jeremiah's words stand fulfilled in the landscape itself. Babylon has become heaps. Its walls are broken. Its gates are silent. The jackals Jeremiah promised have inherited the ground where chariots once raced 4 abreast across the top of the broadest walls in the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar built the most formidable fortification system humanity had ever conceived. Double walls, hundreds of towers, a permanent moat fed by a living river, bronze water gates, a processional road named after the impossibility of conquest. He stamped his name on every brick and inscribed his boasts on cylinders of fired clay. He built his walls as an argument against prophecy, as physical evidence that no force on earth or in heaven could bring his city down. And the walls never